Hi, everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome to today's topic from the New England chapter of Cornet Global on the rapidly changing world of corporate environmental sustainability. Our lead speaker will be Lauren Keenan today, and she is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Fidelity Investments. Just want to have a few housekeeping items to review. And first off is don't forget about the upcoming CRAVE webinars coming up. You can find them in your newsletters. These are a list of the ones in the near future. Also, we'd like to ask you to join in the conversation using social media at any point in time. Really excited about that. And want to make sure we spend some time thanking our special corporate partners. Without you, this would not be possible. So first off, we'd like to thank our platinum sponsors very much. And really a nice thank you to our gold and silver sponsors as well. Just a few things to let you know how to operate today's session, in that we will be taking questions through our Q&A portion of the toolbar, which is located, if you see that red circle, if you click on that, you can enter in any questions that you have. This is the only area that we'll be able to take those questions from today, so please don't open the chat box by mistake. Please use that Q&A window, and I will be reading off the questions as Laura answers them. Again, I'd like to introduce Lauren Keenan, our speaker today, Chief Sustainability Officer at Fidelity Investments. And just a little bit about her. She and her teams are responsible for Fidelity's corporate environmental impact and driving integration of environmental considerations into Fidelity's business strategy as part of the company's broader environmental, social, and governance program. She is an experienced leader in the corporate, institutional, and public sectors and has leveraged the strategic problem-solving skills throughout her career to really strengthen communities that she's worked with. Whether she's working as a public sector architect, multi-party coordinator in academia, or as a corporate sustainability office, she has worked to establish and implement long-term strategies that best support each entity's future needs. Her responsibilities are truly diverse and include driving the environmental sustainability efforts at Fidelity, effectively telling stories, and supporting change throughout this period of rapid cultural evolution. She's also managed other business initiatives, including that of being an excellent career coach at Fidelity. Prior to joining Fidelity in 2006, Ms. Keenan worked in various roles in the real estate industry on projects across the United States. She holds a Master of Business Administration from Simmons College and a Bachelor of Architects from Syracuse University, and is a registered architect in the state of New York. In addition to her full-time responsibilities, Laura has served as an adjunct professor, thesis advisor, visiting critic, and speaker at a lot of various colleges. She is actively engaged with many organizations in her personal and professional communities. And I have to share that she has a truly amazing family and spends a lot of time gardening and paying attention to the children that she so lovingly is bringing up. So Laura, with that, I'd like to turn it over to you. And thank you for being here today with us.
Thanks, Karen, for that introduction. All right, I will share my screen. Karen, if you want to just stop sharing yours, I'll share mine. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our top 3 takeaways will be talking about the common language that's used in the industry. So really identifying and defining that common language, talking about what's driving rapid change in the industry and how it's affecting corporate real estate. And so with that, I'll jump right in. Actually, put my screen full screen here so you can see it more clearly. So with that, just jumping in to define environmental sustainability, I've pulled a variety of definitions for us to discuss because it is an area that's changing so quickly, and people use the term sustainability to mean lots of different things. And so one of the definitions that I liked was sustainability is the process of maintaining change in a balanced environment. A healthy environment is a balanced environment. And though it may feel like we're all trying to manage balance in a very rapidly changing environment around us, it's actually the reverse. And so looking at these definitions, the second one, sustainability, is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And thirdly, sustainability is about stabilizing the currently disruptive relationship between the Earth's two most complex systems, specifically us as humans living in this world. And so that's really important because environmental implications and factors are systemic. Their systemic nature inherently has many interdependencies, including on all of the social issues in the world. And so another term that's evolved, and I'll talk more about that evolution in a minute, but another term that's evolved that you should be familiar with is ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. And this term was originally came to be to define and identify environmental, social, and governance factors as they impact investments. But over time, as you can see from the three definitions, I pulled up a Forbes article that defines ESG on the third definition because it begins to go a little bit more broadly. It talks about the integration of ESG factors into the investment processes and decision-making, because consumers are now beginning to use these factors as decision-making drivers, and it's really impacting competitive pressures in the market. But ESG factors cover a wide spectrum of issues that are traditionally not part of financial analysis, yet may have financial relevance. And I'll talk more about that as we proceed. And so just to give you a timeline of what's really driving this change, certainly after World War II, there were so many actions and movements leading to the civil rights movement in the 60s and moving into the 70s. Then we had a quieter period, but many more environmental and social issues have come to fruition in the last 15 years. And so the term ESG was first coined in 2005. And that term, as I mentioned before, has really was initially focused on investments. And so the desire there was to really understand how ESG factors had a material impact on investment decisions, but the information wasn't transparent enough. And so in 2011, the Sustainability Accounting Board, SASB as it's called, created standards for reporting on ESG issues so they could become more transparent. Around that same time, Michael Porter, the management guru from Harvard, with Fred Kramer, developed a concept of shared value, talking about how companies should be not only making products and having profit that comes from them, but those products and services should also be good for the environment and the society around them, the communities that they're within, giving shared value both to their community and to their company. And so this has all begun and helped to accelerate a more recent focus on purpose-driven actions. And you can see, and you've probably experienced in the news in the last few years, many of the changes that have come in the last 5 years or so. And so I've noted a few here. In 2015, the United Nations created the Paris Accord, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals to address environmental and social issues around the world, with very clear targets for 2030. The Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures is similar to SASB, but different. It's the next evolution of it, some might say. And then gay marriage has been legalized in the United States and has had a marriage equity movement around the world. And in fact, as we look globally and look back in time, we know that social norming tends to change behaviors, and some move faster than others. We can think back to seatbelts or smoking cessation or marriage equity. Some issues move very, very quickly. And so that's important to consider as we look around us right now to consider social justice issues or implications of COVID-19, to say what are the long-term impacts that they will have and how will they change behaviors. Another really important movement to identify here is in the 1980s on the left, the fourth industrial revolution. And so if we just go back in time a bit and talk about the first industrial revolution, which everyone's familiar with, was focused on industrialization. The second industrial revolution focused on mass production. Third industrial revolution was the digital revolution, really important, paving the way for the fourth industrial revolution, which we're still living in today, which has really fostered a level of transparency to more data than we've ever had before, as well as giving us new technologies to access that data. All of that means that we can all not only see and gain information to gain insights and make our own judgments and seek out companies that are aligned with our own personal values, but we can also seek out a better understanding of scientific data, as an example, relative to the environment, to better understand what's happening, and then leverage those technologies and that transparency through social media to be more active. So that level of activism has really driven a dramatic shift in the competitive marketplace, because it's no longer about a company selling to me about what I want. It's me looking for a company that shares purpose or values that are aligned with mine. And so it's really shaping the way companies are addressing these environmental and social issues. With all of that said, I thought it might be also helpful just to have an overview of some macro trends for the next 10 years. Some of these I suspect you are very familiar with because we are actively living in many of them right now. But talking about the generational handover of the demographics, considering the differences in Gen Z, the incoming workforce, and millennials as they quickly become a larger percentage of the workforce. We know that they have many social preferences that are very different than the older generations, which have been the dominant workforce and the drivers of the market. So as this market shifts to the younger generations, there are dramatically different values. And how does that impact these environmental and social issues? We know we have population growth in areas where we haven't had such dramatic population growth, like Africa in the past. We have worsening climate impacts environmentally. We have dramatic climate migration that's projected to happen. The UN predicts anywhere from 25 million climate-related migrants to 1 billion. Most predictions are in the hundreds of millions that will be migrating due to climate, whether it's an increase in heat or sea level rise, making islands uninhabitable, that are causing that many people to migrate by 2050. Major economic impacts we're seeing right now. We've talked about some of the technological impacts on the previous slide about the fourth industrial revolution. We're seeing and living some of the political considerations mentioned here. And then cultural changes are dramatic as well. And one of them, we've seen two of them recently play out. One of them in terms of post-materialism attitudes and lifestyle divergence. You can think about younger generations that have really embraced ride sharing via Lyft and Uber, or bike sharing, less of an interest in owning, more interest in sharing and working together to do the right thing. So a very different attitude that may continue to manifest itself in ways that dramatically impact the economy. And additionally, the culture wars escalate. There's a lot of conversation now as you think about Scandinavia's Greta Thunberg as a climate activist, a teenager who's now has the world stage, and she is very clearly blaming older generations and calling us to action. And so it'll be interesting to see how these considerations continue to emerge, these trends, but also interesting now to consider what we should be doing about it. What action should we be taking proactively in response? Globalization has forever changed us and our dependency on one another. And so there's a broader recognition that we need to be working together. Certainly COVID-19 has heightened and heightened people's awareness and reminded them about our interconnectedness. But specifically talking about sustainability, we're beginning to see action acknowledging that we have to work together, whether it's Greta Thunberg taking a now very social position as Time Magazine's Person of the Year last year, or it's looking at companies that are committing to action to align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that you see on the page, or the Paris Accord. RE100 is committing to 100% renewable energy. All of this is showing that there's action and global alignment and policy being put in place to move these issues forward together, because we know we can't solve them alone. The science and transparency that I mentioned earlier associated with the fourth industrial revolution is also creating a greater urgency in our response. So as we look at reports like the IPCC's report on the top right, that give us more data, because all of the increase in technology and access to the data and our ability to analyze it is demonstrating that climate change, for example, is moving much more quickly than we had expected it to. As I mentioned, many corporations are committing to action and are working to align to these global goals. This is a sample of many that are happening, whether it's the Business Avengers, 14 corporate giants that assembled last year for Climate Week to demonstrate their action, or 624 companies committing to science-based targets to demonstrate how they will achieve the Paris Accord goals and move toward them or achieve them, or RE100 committing to 100% renewable energy. Progressively, companies need to be clearly communicate about what they are committing to and what they believe, so that their clients and customers are aware and can seek that values alignment. And as we look at recent responses, we have BlackRock on the left side. BlackRock Larry Fink has issued for the last 4 years an annual letter, each year ratcheting up the pressure in the industry and causing change in the industry. And this year's letter states climate change has become a defining factor, highlighting further down, markets are slower to reflect that, but we're on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of our financial system. And with that announcement, and his comments this year focusing on climate resilience, their homepage opened, as you see below on the left, making sustainability our standard. But other companies have long since been taking action. Unilever, for example, has been a leader in this area, and more than half of their top brands are they're performing better. More than half of their top brands are focused on sustainability. They're generating 50% more growth and revenue than their other brands. And so they're seeing results as a result of focusing in this area. And that's a great example of the shared value I talked about earlier. On the right side, we have this year's World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. If I zoom in here so you can see it a little better, this report is a long-term outlook with top risks by likelihood and impact over the next 10 years. And in the last 3 years, environmental issues have moved to the top of these risks, surpassing cybersecurity and other major information security concerns. And it's striking to see this now, especially when you see that infectious disease was indeed there, but it was below all of these environmental issues. Oops, sorry. So as we talk about infectious disease, there's certainly many lessons that we are seeking to learn from COVID-19 to understand how that might inform environmental sustainability. We certainly are seeking to understand the social implications of it and how all of that together systemically impacts our society's infrastructure. In terms of similarities, we know that, as I said, they both have a systemic nature, both climate change and environmental factors and COVID. Both are invisible in that people don't necessarily realize that they're here, they're happening to them, they're being impacted by them. And both have significantly inequitable impacts on society. The difference with COVID, however, is it is moving really quickly and its cause is clear. Environmental factors, the cause is much more diverse, much harder to identify, and happening much more slowly. The response to COVID, though, has been phenomenal in terms of global action uniting to try and find a vaccine for it and a better way to treat it, and sharing knowledge with scientists all around the world. There have been public policy interventions, private sector and public sector partnerships and innovation, all seeking to work together to find a solution, a vaccine, and ways to treat it more quickly. And this level of scientific collaboration is also what's needed to address climate change and environmental factors. So as we look at why should we address these factors, just to give you a more clear business case to take back to the office, certainly we're benefiting the environment if we're addressing these factors. We're benefiting society around us as well. It's going to, in the long term, help the brand and reputation of your company if your values are clearly stated and you are able to be authentic in living up to them. And the reality is, when you're making good long-term environmental decisions, you're typically saving money. Fidelity saves millions of dollars every year by making good environmental decisions because they minimize our consumption and our impact. We also know that our clients and customers are requiring that we do this, that our employees care, and that the market perception is shifting dramatically to care and focus on these issues. Since the United States pulled out of the Paris Accord several years ago, public sentiment and perception of who is responsible for solving climate issues has shifted by more than 25% to corporations. So the mass public is now looking at us as corporations to be solving these issues or be a major player in the solution, partnering with private sector entities. And so, sorry, my mouse is jumping around on me. And I appear to have frozen. So hopefully you didn't lose me for any significant amount of time there. So as we look at this integration of ESG factors into our business and consider how do we integrate them into our daily decisions, I just wanted to highlight that the goal of the integration is really to focus on that shared value. How can you make decisions that have a positive business impact while also having a positive impact on your employees and the communities around you? And so I've listed here a few of the major considerations relative to environmental, social, and governance, but wanted to also give you some more specific examples on the next page. So if we think about environmental issues, certainly thinking about climate resilience, thinking about the types of buildings you have, the communities that they're within, the infrastructure in those communities, thinking about how is your company prepared to be resilient to climate impacts. And so COVID has certainly been a test of business resilience to all of us. In addition, though, thinking about climate resilience relative to increased heat, to drought, to wildfires, to sea level rise, and so on. Increased water in terms of how much rainwater is falling, as well as storm intensity. Thinking about those major issues and how resilient are your facilities? How resilient is your workforce if they have to work from home, as COVID has been a test for? Considering about your greenhouse gas emissions, which you're probably already doing. Considering your resource consumption, which again, you're probably already doing, whether that's water, electricity, paper, single-use items, looking for ways to reduce your consumption overall. In addition, thinking about the waste that your company is producing, whether it's landfill or recycling or compost, e-waste, furniture, office supplies. Offices produce a tremendous amount of waste, considering ways to reduce that. And how you track both your consumption and your reduction and share it transparently with all of your stakeholders is certainly a key issue I'll talk more about in a minute. Considering new innovations to make your buildings more efficient, like smart building systems. Considering healthy buildings, whether you're pursuing WELL certification or FitWell certification, or just considering the materiality of all of the furniture and finishes in your space, to think about how are they off-gassing, how do they affect your employees and your customers and clients in your space. Considering about the food that's eaten as well, thinking about the footprint of the food that's served in your facilities. Is it local? Is it organic? How much emissions were created as a result of the shipment of your food? And then seeking new employee benefits, whether it's bike sharing or ride sharing, incentives for electric vehicles, seeking new employee benefits that will make them be more loyal to your company because they'll feel good about doing good for the environment. And then always thinking about your impact in your physical footprint in the environment, in terms of how are you impacting the ecosystems and the biodiversity around you, around your buildings. Many of these issues could go across multiple categories. And so some of the issues, such as procurement in the social category, for example, certainly applies to environmental as well. But thinking about from the social issues, certainly we are all hopefully always aware, but certainly much more attuned at the moment to human rights and social justice and equity right now. But considering how does that play out in your workforce and in your workplace, recognizing that current employees as well as progressively incoming employees are very focused and driven by purpose and very focused on authenticity of your corporate actions with what you're saying, and considering how you can be a part of innovation. We talked about the disruption of the fourth industrial revolution and how if you think about how disruptive that technology has been, think about your life before this little thing. This iPhone came to be 12 years ago. Think about your life before Lyft and Uber, Airbnb, before Venmo, before Bitcoin, and think about how many of those things you use every day and how disruptive our daily life has been as a result of those technologies. And we know that those are only projected to disrupt faster in the future. And so seeking innovative opportunities and thinking about what might that disruption be to your workplace. Related to that, when you think about all of those changes that I just mentioned, I couldn't live without Venmo to be remotely collecting money for end of the year teacher gifts as an example today. But they've changed the way I live, work, and play. Today, my work and my life is very integrated. It was before COVID, and it certainly is more so now. And so thinking about how differently we work today and what might that look like in the future and how might that impact corporate real estate in the future. It certainly is an imperative to engage your stakeholders more now than ever with social media to make sure that you are communicating with clarity and transparently, as I said earlier, but you're engaging your associates and supporting them not only at work and even pre-COVID, but at home. So educating them and providing them with opportunities for action and helping them to understand that their action and your commitment isn't just to your workplace, but it's to your community, which means them at work and at home. But educating them to listen to their voice about how you can and should be doing some things differently. Our associates come up with phenomenal ideas that drive our actions every day and have driven us to better solutions. As I said earlier, with globalization, we are connected forevermore. And so seeking partnerships, as we're doing with COVID, both public-private partnerships globally, to figure out how do we address environmental issues together in order to achieve the United Nations Paris Accord and Sustainable Development Goals. We talked a bit about the post-materialism earlier. We talked about bike sharing and ride sharing as examples, but we've also seen it in corporate real estate. WeWork is sharing workspace, and it'll be interesting to see, and certainly a factor for you to consider going forward, how not only COVID changes the way we work and the way we work in our spaces and how much space we need, but also just renting versus owning. How will that market shift over time, not only with the COVID implications, but also with generational preferences? Safety and wellness certainly is a high priority in the world of COVID, but it's also always been a high priority, and environmental factors come into play there. And then procurement has both environmental and social considerations. As you think about your supply chain, your vendors, their vendors, their sub-vendors, and so on, where are all of your products coming from? Who's making them? How are those people being treated? What is the environmental safety situation around them and the place that they're working and creating these products? Thinking that through and requiring it in your contracts to take a leadership position. And then I've taken a little bit of liberty with the governance category here to address broader infrastructure issues as well. But as I mentioned earlier, considering global alignment with your goals and your strategy surrounding environmental sustainability, considering materiality, what are the most material issues for your company or business to be focusing on? And how can you align your sustainability strategy to support those? Considering the long-term implications of public policy, if carbon taxes expand and there are incentives put in place, as there's a Article 98, 97, 98, I believe it is, in New York City, which will impose carbon taxes if your emissions are too high. If public policy decisions like that continue, what are the implications to your building operations? What level of infrastructure is needed in your community for early warning systems relative to climate, or even to continue to operate in sea level rise, as an example, in the Seaport District? The infrastructure is below ground, it's aged. So what do we have to do to put in place more resilient infrastructure to support us in our future world? Considering information security is certainly paramount, but also thinking about the ethics of big data and the transparency of information. What information should you be accessing? What information should you share? Thinking about business continuity, as I mentioned earlier, having transparent certification and reporting so that your employees, your customers, and clients can access the information to understand what is it that your company believes in and what are you focused on and how does it align with your business strategy. And then having robust oversight and accountability for your strategy and implementation of your goals to make that transparent so your employees, customers, and clients all understand what you're doing. So with that, I've said a lot. I hope you have a lot of questions for us. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and Karen will come back on for a Q&A.
Absolutely. And so folks, feel free to write in any questions in that Q&A area. We're looking forward to hearing from you. I am not on video. There we go. Thank you. And I do have one here, Laura. You mentioned Unilever and that their top-selling products are very, very profitable and very, very green. Just considering that, in your point of view, do you think it's customer choice that makes them top-selling products, or is actual manufacturing of these products less expensive to manufacture, therefore it's more profitable?
That's a great question, and I can't speak to the manufacturing cost savings, but in speaking with the Unilever team and in reading about some of their work, certainly it is customer choice, consumer choice, that is driving the growth of those products over their other products. So customers are using their purchasing power to express their vote and seek their alignment with Unilever's values.
Very, very interesting. Here's another question, and they want to know your point of view on COVID and what it has done to the environment, with the phenomenon of being able to see in Beijing, being able to hear dolphins swim through the waters in Venice, and all of these little silver linings that have actually come out of this pandemic. And where will it go into the future? How will we carry that forward in your point of view?
So I do hope we can carry it forward. I do hope that and I'm inspired by the global scientific collaboration that COVID has fostered, and hope that we can carry that forward into climate issues. And the increase in activism around climate that was growing with the climate strike last year, which was the largest global activism since the 1960s, last September. And so I'm hopeful that we will see social justice change with the current activism, as well as environmental change, and that this level of activism and the transparency through social media will help keep it moving forward. I'm also hopeful that we will not be divided, but instead be brought together by collaboration with all of this activism across different groups all around the world to seek action there. Certainly, all of us that are working in the environmental field are looking for data to connect cleaner air to better health benefits, and keeping cars off roads to less interrupted ecosystems and migration patterns. There are things happening in India with elephants on the roads that haven't been able to cross in certain places. So there are many aspects of nature coming back to life, with us having a less disruptive impact to the globe right now. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to seek data and try and find ways to leverage that data to show the benefits and drive further action.
Personally speaking, Laura, I'd love to see a book on everything that has occurred because of this. Really, I'd love to see it all written down. There's another question here around purpose. You spoke about purpose quite a bit. What at Fidelity are you doing to help promote purpose via sustainability, driving that purpose to help your organization kind of foster that thinking?
Sure. So there's a lot of good discussion happening at Fidelity about it right now, for sure. And in recent years, we are looking to make our cross-enterprise ESG strategy as a company far more robust. We are working to continue to integrate ESG factors into our decision making in terms of our investments, and we've made enormous progress there in recent years. So those factors are considered on all of our investments today, and we're actively having discussions about them on a regular basis with the companies that we invest in. But we certainly have been very active in our communities historically, and will continue to be, and are very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplace as well right now. And so there are many work streams happening in this area at Fidelity currently.
Laura, one thing that I'm particularly interested in, and I've seen it grow and grow and grow within Fidelity, is the different groups that you're forming in the different locations with folks like Lisa Rappel and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think this audience might like to know how you're really promoting it even amongst the associate base.
Sure. So what Karen is talking about is we have, years ago, in 2011, in Salt Lake City, we had a grassroots team of employees that started our first regional sustainability team. Recently, in the last 12 months, we've expanded those regional sustainability teams to 16 of our sites globally. And many large companies, your companies, maybe some of them, have similar sustainability teams, which empower our associates to action in each of the regions in which we operate. And so they are empowered to participate in their community on our behalf to make a difference environmentally in their community. And we are seeking for them to not only reflect Fidelity's goals and align with our purpose as a company, but also then to take that step further to adapt their goals to that local community's needs, to meet the needs in that community, as well as empowering them to drive innovation and bring ideas back from their region to the enterprise level. And so really looking to hear their voice and engage them as stakeholders in solving this problem, as I had mentioned earlier.
Really interesting. And what are some of the initiatives that you're running, like within your built environments, around sustainability, and what is it doing?
Sure. So we are currently actively mapping our path to the 2030 Paris Accord goals. And so we are actively mapping our reduction of our water consumption, reduction of electricity, our path to 100% renewable energy sourcing. We are actively reducing our waste. We just rolled out centralized trash in all of our facilities this year and are shifting to reusable flatware and glassware. So making those changes across the portfolio to reduce our consumption of single-use items, but also focused on always reducing paper and then, of course, greenhouse gas emissions. And so we've made dramatic progress in that area. We have shifted in the last couple of years and have begun to be laser focused on climate resilience. And so that has been a big area of focus. And then lastly, I would say we have also a large area of focus around our stakeholder engagement. So engaging and empowering and educating our employees through the regional sustainability teams and broader, more transparent communications, but also beginning to build partnerships in our communities and leveraging those regional sustainabilities to do so in each of our communities, but then at the enterprise level as well, because as I mentioned earlier, we have to begin to work together in new non-competitive ways to solve this problem together.
Really nice, really nice. And one of the last questions here is to define purpose. You mentioned Gen Z requires purpose. What does that mean?
That is a great question. I didn't define purpose. I should have had that as one of my first slides. But it's really about aligning. It's about identifying the company's values. So Fidelity has a commitment to inspire better futures, and we're looking specifically to inspire financial futures. Our core focus is on financial education and support of your financial well-being. However, each company has its own purpose, and there are values that go along with that. For Fidelity, as a privately held company, the Johnsons have always been focused on good long-term investments and investing in the environment, and our social issues are no different. They are good long-term investments. And so as a company, we can authentically speak to some of those decisions and our values around them. But each company needs to be able to identify what are those material topics that you're focused on, and what are your values in association with them, so that your customers, your clients, your employees can be aware and make that choice if it's something that is on their decision-making list to align with your purpose.
Really nice, really nice. I'm not sure if we have any more questions. If you do, you can write them in at this point in time. Anything else you have to say about all of this, Laura, or any parting words that you'd like to say to the group?
I think what I would say is there are so many ways to get involved and to support environmental sustainability in your corporate real estate portfolio. And there you can, whether you have the ability to engage your management or your associates, or you're a service provider and you're engaging your clients, there's so many different ways to engage on the issue. And it's hard to tackle them all at once. So it's really a matter of taking on what you can to make a difference where you can at the moment. And when you've accomplished that, move on to the next, because there are a long list of ways that you can get involved and act.
Really nice. And can this team reference you or call you up someday to talk about this? Is that something that you're open to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
My email, I'm happy to share my email, is laura.keenan@FMR, Fidelity Management Research, FMR.com.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Laura. That's the end of the questions, and really enjoyed the conversation today. Debbie, do you want to close us out at this point, or?
Yeah, first I just want to thank you both for taking time out of your day to do this presentation to our group. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You guys both have a great weekend.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks for all the participation too. Bye-bye now. Thank you, Laura.
Have a good weekend.